Hello everybody! Welcome to episode 4 of Under the Spotlight, the series where we take a look at retro games and discuss whether or not they're worth our time playing or worth our time physically owning.
We're committed to this.
Because let's face it, sometimes it might seem like a good idea.
What's up, Doc? Oh, Josiah, what brings you in this time? Oh, dear God.
On today's episode, Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage. Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage released on September 16th, 1994 in North America for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. Having loosely followed the Maximum Carnage event which played out within Spider-Man comic releases between 1963 and 1993, Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage became one of the first video games to be based on a comic book story rather than have a generic standalone plot created specifically for the game. In the same light, the game was also reimagined as a comic mini-series fairly soon after its release in 1994, having the miniseries release in 1995 as Venom Carnage Unleashed. It is one of the only games licensed for the Super Nintendo with a red cartridge, the only other being Doom. A few sources suggest Street Fighter 2, but I can only find evidence of a 30th anniversary edition being red, and couldn't find any confirmation on whether or not it was officially licensed, so for the sake of this video, it's just Doom. The Super Nintendo release received mixed reviews, initially being criticized for its sloppy artwork style and basic, often underwhelming controls. The game did go on to gain a cult following, claiming it was a faithful adaptation of the comic series, as well as a welcome challenge on a system that was otherwise developed to be more child-friendly or child-focused. While this is the case, the story so boiled down, you could buy the comics for less than the price of this game and enjoy the story probably significantly more. And outside of the challenge, does it really offer much more? Let's go find out. First things first, this game has an incredible soundtrack. Being produced by rock band Green Jelly, the soundtrack adds an element of energy that absolutely fits perfectly with this game's grittier tone. Spider-Man Venom Maximum Carnage is notorious as being one of the most difficult games developed for the Super Nintendo. Not just for its noticeably sharp difficulty spikes, but also for its underperforming control and combat system.
Why is it so hard?
It also does suffer from a problem similar to what we saw back in episode 2 with Spawn for the Super Nintendo, where without certain critical information, your experience is made significantly harder.
It's not this again.
Yes, this again.
With Spawn, it was the unlisted, otherwise unknown list of special moves. With Spider-Man Venom Maximum Carnage, it's the near impossible to discover secrets that enhance your chances of progression dramatically. And without finding them by happenstance or having known about them prior to, there's no way that you would know these even exist. And they really do change the gameplay enough for this to be a fairly big concern. Now, that annoyance aside, the animation with this game, while at times well done and entertaining, can be a bit underwhelming and leave a little bit to be desired. Don't get me wrong, this game does absolutely have something to appreciate visually, especially because it's very reminiscent of the 1990s comic book era. It can't be denied that there are times where repetition and legibility issues start to interfere with the overall experience of the game. This point ties into the surprisingly lacking combat system. For what it is, it does the job. It is satisfying enough to have you wanting to come back to play this game a little bit more, but when compared to other beat-em-ups that were available at the time, I found there were times I was expecting to be able to do moves and combinations that were otherwise common in the beat-em-up genre that I wasn't able to perform in Spider-Man Venom Maximum Carnage. Now, I do have to give credit where credit is due. The sound effects and the crunchy feeling that punches have when they connect does a lot of the heavy lifting in regards to the combat. While the controls are still a bit mushy and at times seemingly unresponsive, there's a lot to be said about why this game should be admired. As I mentioned, it has a solid soundtrack that is accompanied by a fairly decent, albeit a little bit lacking combat experience.
It's average.
The pixel art can be hit or miss, but it's more often a hit than it is a miss. And where the story can be experienced outside of the game through another medium, there's an entirely unique way that this game can be appreciated.
God, I could read it, but reading?
Despite an absurd amount of difficulty, this game deserves some merit as one that should be appreciated more for what it is than what it could have become. Now, while it is fairly arguable whether or not it's worth experiencing this game, is it worth physically owning a copy? At this time, no. This game is nowhere near worth the current asking price. If you already own a copy, I would encourage an attempt piecing together a complete in-box set, but unless this is the case, or you're just a big Spider-Man Venom fan, there isn't too much value in currently owning a copy of this game. At $53 Canadian, there's about $35 worth of content missing to make that price worthwhile. While this is a fun experience, I truly can't recommend, for that price, experiencing this game natively on the Super Nintendo, or owning a physical copy for that matter. Is this a game that I think is worth experiencing? Yeah, actually I do think so, especially with the right technology behind it. This could be a pretty solid experience. But natively on the Super Nintendo, especially for that price, you're better off spending it on something else. While it is still cool that it is a red cartridge, that's not enough to get me to say that you should own this game. Anyway, what do I do now?